Podcast,
a podcast for queer Latina bookworms who love queer Latina stories.
We are your hosts,
Adrian Gaston Garcia, aka AGG,
and Sergio Lopez. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special live episode of Los Bookies, coming to you live from WorldPride here in Washington, D.C. Before we begin, I want to thank the MLK Library and its staff for hosting us today. I also want to shout out the DC Public Library, Loyalty Bookstore, Latinx History Project, Latinx Pride, Capital Pride Alliance, and WorldPride for helping us make this an official event for WorldPride DC.
This afternoon, I'm super happy to be in conversation with two amazing storytellers, Edgar Gomez, author of Alligator Tears, and Venessa Vida Kelley, author of When the Tides Held the Moon. Edgar Gomez is the author of High Risk Homosexual, one of my favorite books, which received an American Book Award, a Stonewall Israel Fishman Honor Award, and the Lambda Literary Award. Born and raised in Florida, Gomez has written for the Los Angeles Times, Poets and Writers, Lit Hub, New York Magazine, and beyond. His work has been supported by the National Endowment of the Arts, the New York Foundation of the Arts, the Black Mountain Institute. Gomez lives in New York and Puerto Rico. Venessa Vida Kelley is a New Yorican writer, illustrator, and aspiring mermaid. They hold a BA and MA degrees in English literature from the University of Delaware and the George Washington University, respectively. And their illustrations have decorated books worldwide. They live in Washington, D.C. with their spouse and two sons.
Over the next hour, we'll dive into the books, their journeys, and what pride means to them.
Welcome, Edgar and Venessa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
And what I'm really excited about is when we pitched this idea of having both Edgar and Venessa, we're like, yes, we can make this work. And as we read their books, I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of great similarities and differences in the books that we're going to explore today, which I'm really excited about.
Before we get started, we're going to ask both Edgar and Venessa to read an excerpt from both of their books. Edgar, if you can start with you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm going to start by reading just the first couple of pages of the book. So you don't need a lot of context. It's a memoir about growing poor and Latinx in Florida. So this is the opening of chapter 1. It happened on a weekday, around 8:30 p.m. I remember because America's Next Top Model was on. My older brother Hector stormed into the living room and yanked me up by the arm without saying a word. Seconds later, we were in Mom's room, standing at the foot of her bed, where she lay shivering and twisting her head from side to side, strands of her copper-tinted hair glued to her sweaty forehead, dark roots growing like weeds along the edges. ¿A dónde están? I want to go. I don't understand, she kept saying. Her eyelids fluttered open and closed, as if she were coming in and out of a bad dream. I can't feel anything. Where are they? I'm cold. My stepdad, Omar, was seated next to her. Go to your mother, he told me. Seeing the panic in Omar's eyes, how small and scared he looked in his boxers and an old baggy tank top, I had to stop myself from laughing at him. Since marrying Mom, the only times he'd acknowledged I existed were when he was telling her how soft I was, that she'd better put me in sports with other boys before she ended up raising a little girl. Now look who was acting like a little girl. And for what? It's not like Mom was dying. People didn't die out of nowhere. She was just having a nightmare. Or, okay, maybe she was sick, but give her some ginger tea and Vaporu and she'd be back to normal in no time. Come on, didn't he know her at all? Annoyed with Hector for dragging me away from the TV for whatever this was, I tried to revive the excitement I'd felt moments earlier watching Top Model. My favorite contestant, Eva, had performed well in the week's challenge. Despite her fear of spiders, she remained not only calm, but beautiful while modeling diamonds with a live tarantula crawling on her face. I wanted to see her reaction when she won. I imagined Tyra revealing her photo as the week's top contestant, a scene I could have been watching back in the living room, when suddenly Mom began to groan. It was in response to Hector, who'd climbed into the bed to shake her by the shoulders, his round, pudgy cheeks streaked with tears. The sight of him threw me. My brother never cried. He was 15. I was 12. Levántese, Hector pleaded at Mom. Wake up, don't go to sleep. With each word that spilled out of my brother's mouth, The reality that something might actually be wrong became harder to avoid. Writhing on top of her sweat-soaked bed sheets, Mom muttered more gibberish. "It's okay," she insisted. "I can't feel my legs." She turned abruptly to Omar. "Who are you?" The color drained out of his dark brown face. He bowed his head in prayer. "Diosito, por favor, no dejes que esta..." I took a step back toward the door. I had to get back to Eva. I needed to be there when she won. Whatever was going on here wasn't real. Mom couldn't be dying because then who would cut our hair or yell at us to close the windows when the AC was on? Who would burst into my room at 2:02 in the morning of my birthday every year, jump onto my bed and shout, "Guess what your mama was doing at this exact minute?" "Should we call an ambulance?" Hector cried out. No one answered him. Not me, or Omar, or my cousin Dante. He'd been so quiet I hadn't noticed he was in the room with us, held hostage by a portrait of Jesus nailed to the wall. Dante shifted his eyes from Hector's terrified face to Omar's, to mine, waiting for one of us to make a move. It horrifies me to admit it now. But right then, what I was standing there thinking was, how much does an ambulance cost?
Thank you, Edgar. That's just such a strong start to the book. Vanessa, we'll give you a minute also.
Oh my God, I do need a minute because I get choked up every time I read that opening.
And
Oh my
she's
God.
okay.
I know. That's part of why I had to finish the book so quickly. I was like, I need to see if his mom is all right. Oh boy. Okay. So this one does need a little context. Benigno Caldera is an iron worker in 1911 who gets commissioned to build a water tank for a Coney Island proprietor and then gets roped into kidnapping its intended inhabitant, a merman from the East River. And so he connects with this creature through whispers, spoken through the glass. And this is one of their conversations together. Some merperson vocabulary for y'all. A harmony is what they call their family groups. And the currents is how they talk about their spirituality. Rio glided closer. Where did you find the carved shell that hangs from your neck? This? I held up the medallion. This ain't a shell. It's San Cristobal, the patron saint of travelers. Titi gave it to me for protection on the way to Nueva York, so that you could find a new harmony. I didn't usually like poking around the old abandoned corridors of my past. But Rio was a natural at getting my malas mañas out of the way. Tactless though he was, when I turned over my memories to him, he handled them carefully. Feels like I've been hunting for a harmony my whole life, I said. I'm beginning to think there's nowhere on earth where someone like me can even find one. Someone like you. A Puerto Rican boy, you mean? Since Rio first spoke to me almost 2 weeks ago, he'd called me a parasite, a coward, and a barnacle. But he never lied, and he never cracked wise about the parts of me I couldn't help. He'd told me his darkest secret when he spilled his guts about the General Slocum. Maybe it wouldn't kill me to spill some of mine. Brace yourself for a stupid story, I muttered. So he laid back on the water, settling in to be entertained. This particular memory would be easier to share in Spanish. Titi Luz had found me in Humacao where she had business, but then she brought me home to her tobacco farm in Caguas, where I met Ramon, the son of an insurrectionist who lived in the sugar plantation nearby. He was the sort of rascal everybody liked, cheerful and fearless, and more handsome than a jibaro had any right to be. He was tall, even though he ate like a huibird, with coffee eyes and a smile as bright as a coquí's chirp whenever there was some mischief he wanted to include me in. Ramon was my best friend, and I had no words for what I felt whenever I looked at him. After long days working in the sun, the dirt would be all over our skin and clothes. Ramon smelling like sugarcane, me smelling like pigs and tobacco. So we often went to the shallow stream to bathe. One afternoon, we sat on the bank waiting for our clothes to dry, and the feeling came over me again, like warm honey. I opened my palm, recollection rising to the surface of my skin. I took his hand, just to feel it against mine, but as soon as I did it, he yanked it back with a glare like I'd attacked him. "What's wrong with you?" he said, disgusted. And he grabbed his wet clothes and ran back down the yellow path away from me. "Benigno," Rio breathed. But I couldn't look at him. If I did, I'd lose the nerve to tell him the rest. When I called on Ramon the next day, he puffed himself up and blocked the door frame as if I was an invader. He had obviously told his father what I'd done, because he wasted no time telling me there was no place in an independent Puerto Rico. I ventured a look at Rio. For a nameless queer like me. The fronds of his tail fin came up behind him and draped over his shoulders. He shrank into them. "What did you do?" I cleared my throat of the rock that had lodged itself there and fell back into English. I bloodied his lip. Rio nodded soberly. "While generally I disapprove of violence, he appears to have earned it." "Yeah, well," I shrugged. "I learned all I needed to know about what the world thinks of someone like me. By which I mean, manos a Dios, I don't know how to say this." I drew in a deep breath. A Puerto Rican boy who falls in love with other boys. If I hadn't had it already, I had Rio's complete attention now. I thought my whole body might dissolve through the grill from shame. "What ridiculous savagery," he breathed in English, "would make humans spurn a person for something so ordinary." I squinted at him. "You mean mer people don't care?" "Benigno, why in the seven seas should it matter who we love?" Instead of an answer, a different question slipped out before I could catch it. "Have you ever been in love?"
Thank you for that. I know, a lot. Like you both read like very intense pieces from your books.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride, happy World Pride, y'all. And I'll take a breather. No, I'll start with you, Venessa. Just one thing I really enjoyed about this book is how it explores queer identity, both through like this form of like magic, but also science, right? Because like a lot of sea creatures, right, when they have to like choose an identity, it sometimes changes or it's sometimes assigned differently. And I thought it was just really brilliant, just kind of the way that you navigated how matter of fact Rio's response was to kind of Benny and the way that he was kind of like hiding his personal identity.
Yeah, I mean, the benefit of having this creature be the sort of like mirror inversion of Benny is also, I think, to help Benny realize how much of his own, suppression is the result of constructions. Like, he lives in a world where there are these rules imposed upon his life about who he's supposed to be, who he's allowed to be, who he's allowed to love. And so just having Benny have this sort of fragmented identity as a result of like pushing all of that down made it, I think, very easy to have this, for all intents and purposes, biologically fragmented being in front of him, who for all, in all other ways is a completely integrated being. Rio he knows himself and he, feels himself in connection to his entire species, and it just like doesn't compute for him. And for the first time, Benny is able to see the absurdity of the world he lives in.
Like I said earlier, it was really interesting when we thought about inviting you both as guests and just like, oh, where are the similarities that exist in these two books? Like, how can we find that and how can they be in conversation with each other? And one thing that I really enjoyed about your chapter, Edgar, is at the beginning, we have this boy who's really into America's Next Top Model, but we don't, like, he hasn't identified yet as being queer, right? Like it's, but you gotta get these like inferences from like things that he enjoys, right? And he's like in this very intense moment where his mom is sick, right? And no one is taking any action. And it's up to Dante, the cousin, who's kind of an outsider in the family, to come and actually do something about it, right? I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's almost like maybe Dante was our Rio. You know, this person who came and presented this mirror image. So also there's this other similarity that we kind of have. So Puerto Rican, right? But your story has to do with mermaids. My mom worked at Starbucks, mermaids, right?
There's a layer there.
But I say that because, yeah, we grew up really poor. My mom was our sole supporter. And she was a barista at Starbucks at the airport, making something like $21K a year, which in retrospect, I'm like, how were you keeping us all alive? And on top of that, our other relatives would like send their cousins to live with us. And I'd be like, we barely have enough to feed ourselves. Dante was my cousin, was this person who, he grew up in, not like rich or anything, but his family had a little bit more money and they were a little bit more stable. And before he came to live with us, I was in this like state of like, I was very delusional. I was a kid. I was like, I'm in Orlando.
We're delusional?
Not too much. I didn't realize that we were poor. And also, I had grown up hearing my mom's stories about growing up in Nicaragua. My dad is Puerto Rican, and living through the dictatorship, through the Civil War, walking down the street and seeing dead bodies lining the gutters. Not having to, you know, that classic like immigrant parent story, like I have to walk, 3 miles through the mud to get to school every morning. And so I would compare my life to those stories and be like, oh, we're doing amazing. And then my cousin came to live with us and we shared a bunk bed in a tiny room. And every night he would get on the phone with his parents and just talk so much shit about us and be like, oh my God, like they don't have AC, they eat Starbucks every day, like what is this? And it was only listening to him that I was like, oh wait, like something is wrong here. So yeah, Dante was kind of like a parallel character to Rio. Yeah.
Thanks, Vanessa. What I wanted to ask was, what was the inspiration about writing this book about a merman? And have you watched Splash, which is a 1980s movie with Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah, which is a masterpiece and still stands the test of time?
Okay, so yes, I did watch Splash on repeat as a kid, but then I watched it again last year, and I was like, this is the most inappropriate thing I've ever seen. I was like, they're going at it like rabbits in the bedroom the whole time. I was like, what? Was this the TNT version that I saw as a kid? What? No. Yeah, well, I think I've always had like a gravitation towards mer people. Like I come from a long line of singers. Everyone in my family is a performer, so we've all, had a little bit of the siren song in us. And really what kind of kickstarted it was, I was working as an illustrator, and there's something that happens every May. It's Mermay. And if you are a cosplayer or you are like an illustrator or you're a fan artist, like the internet just erupts with like mer art. And it's just this like, I look forward to it every year. This year I was like, I don't know if I have the time. I've got too many commissions, whatever. But then this image just popped into my head of a shared kiss across the glass of a tank between the merman and his early 20th century, early, 20th century lover. And from there, all of the questions just started to like emerge. How did they get there? Who captured him? What was the backstory here? And from there, the entire, like it was following breadcrumb trails to the story that would wind up being written.
Awesome. And then I think Adrian mentioned that you're an illustrator. Did you also do the illustrations for this book? Because it's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yes, the entire book, cover to cover, is my illustrations.
Fantastic. That's great. Edgar, what about you? And this is essentially your second novel, a follow-up to your first memoir, High Risk Homosexual, which is a fantastic title, by the way. What made you write a part two?
I think while I was writing High Risk Homosexual, that book has more to do with queerness, and the journey is me starting in a place of extreme shame and finding pride along the way gradually. And as I was writing that story, there was a lot that I wanted to say about money and about class and about growing up poor, because those things directly impacted my queerness journey. But I didn't feel like there was a lot of room. And so this book is definitely in conversation. Alligator Tears is definitely in conversation with High Risk Homosexual, because it feels like all of the stories that I felt like I couldn't super fit into that book. Or sometimes there were certain stories that I did write in the first book, but that I wanted to look at through a more financial lens, like the story of me coming out to my mom at the mall at Saks Fifth Avenue, where she was cashing in a coupon. And that's a story that's in High Risk Homosexual, how, we were in this really fancy place, and weirdly it felt like a safe space, because I was like, there's like all rich white ladies over here. My mom isn't gonna have a tantrum or like scream at me, very respectability politics. And I really wanted to tell that story again and really lean into the fact that the reason that I felt like it was safe to come out there was because we were poor, and because I didn't think that she would do anything out of fear, that these ladies would judge her.
Yeah. I love that because I think Sergio and I always talk about this, but we also grew up like super poor. So like to have a book that's reflected at the intersection of not being like only queer and Latine, but also like poor, just like hit, and I think I did similar stunts on my mom too, but she would also take me to the bathroom and then reprimand me there. So like also, but I think what was interesting, right? No, so, yeah. But what's interesting, like another like similarity that both of these books draw is, in conversation with poverty and like what this idea is of the American dream, right? And like one is told from like a historical, like fictional past, and one is told from not that long ago, right? Because you're still young, Edgar, and I know, right? And it's like, but it's also like the American dream, like through the lens of like immigrant and like working class, right? Which I think, talks a lot about like survival and how these two characters are just surviving. And the excerpt that you just read is just like, I already have all this against me. Like, why is God adding like another thing to like add against this complication of my identity? And I was just wondering, like, there's a lot of stuff happening in today's political climate, and it just seems that like these books just really speak to like these times right now. And what are those conversations that these books are having about that?
Yeah, when I think about the American dream, I think about the American dream that I inherited from my immigrant parents, who, specifically my mom coming from Nicaragua and fleeing a dictatorship. The dream is, okay, once you get to the US, this is a democracy, everyone is equal. In theory, if you work really hard and pull yourself up by the bootstraps, you can be successful. And just like, don't make a fuss, don't complain, don't like ruin any opportunities that may come your way. Just be like the perfect worker, be the perfect worker bee, and you will make it one day. And you might make it financially, you might get promoted, or you might be able to retire. In some of our countries, there's no system to retire. or you might make it spiritually. You will suffer your whole life, but don't worry. At the very end, you'll go to heaven, and it'll be amazing, and you'll get rewarded. And so those are stories that I grew up believing. Like, okay, I'm going to work really hard, and I'm going to make it. When I really first started writing this book, Alligator Tears, it was at the beginning of the pandemic. I was so broke. I had lost my job as a cocktail server at this gay bar in New York. I was living in Queens. It's a big immigrant community with a lot of undocumented people that reminded me of my family. And I saw firsthand in Queens just how badly both the government and this idea of the American dream were failing my community. The government wasn't, if you're undocumented, you don't have access to things like food stamps, to welfare programs. And so I was seeing people go out and risk their lives because they had to keep working. And they didn't have an option to not. And that reminded me of both myself and of my mom, who was still working at Starbucks at the time. She was high risk, and I just started thinking, like, the American dream is obviously, like, not working. There's obviously a scam going on here that I just see, basically just feels like work, 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 postpone your happiness for some tomorrow that might never come. And in the meantime, just suck it up. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Life is way too short. And I started asking myself, okay, if this reward that the American dream promises, if this reward of, let's say, financial success is never going to come, what can I do to have a rich life today? What can I do to stop postponing my happiness for later? And I think similar to you, I started with an image. I asked myself, like, what is the time when you felt the most poor and powerless? And it was that opening scene, when I was standing at the foot of my mom's bed, too afraid to call an ambulance. And from there, I started having all these questions, like, okay, who showed up to me? Who showed up for me when the government didn't? How did I survive through these really dark times? What got me through it? And from there, these memories started coming to me, and it became this book. Yeah.
I guess, to piggyback off of what you have said, because it resonates 1,000%. This idea of the American dream being like a sham meant to sort of redirect our attention away from the ways this capitalist world exploits us and, abuses us for the gain of people who we never get to meet. One of the reasons why my book takes place in a sideshow is to sort of underscore the performative aspect of, trying to be an American and trying to survive. And, the fact is that, at that time and before then, if you were different, if you were queer, BIPOC, disabled, if you had some kind of, something that marginalized you, the consequences were institutionalization, imprisonment, death, violence, etc. So the sideshow became the refuge for a lot of these individuals who could not be themselves. But the trade-off, of course, is like, well, I guess I need to be on a stage and earning, 15 cents, a head in the audience to be able to live my truth. But interestingly, I had written the book during the pandemic, not knowing that we were going to find ourselves here in 2025, staring down a reality that feels very much like it belongs in 1911. But the comfort that I get from looking into history is seeing the ways in which mutual aid existed back then. And people found ways of creating community all along the Brooklyn waterfront that, we had a very vibrant queer community. They don't get written about. And, people like Benny and the members of the sideshow don't feature in the history that we get taught in school, that we get, educated about in school. But there is comfort in knowing that these strategies of survival are nothing new, and people were able to find happiness and joy in each other's presence, regardless of whatever shenanigans the richest among us were up to, you know?
Edgar, I think you are able to write in a very raw and honest way, which I really appreciated. The story about your teeth, fantastic. I loved it. Everyone should read that part. I think it's like the third story. But there's a story in there, and it's Kids with Guns, which I believe is like the second, third story, where you're really able to write about humor and heartache in a way that I think is really, really funny. So this is the part where there's a lot going on in that story, but this is where you're dating your first boyfriend online where you never meet.
And I'm catfishing him.
And yes, yes, and you're
And he's
catfishing.
catfishing me.
Yes, but then he one-ups you with a banger of a lie. But I just want to know, like, how are you able to balance that, the humor and the heartbreak in your writing?
Ooh, yeah, I mean, I would say two things. First, I think that's something that I learned from my mom. You know, when you come from a country where there's just a lot of dark stuff happening all the time, you kind of learn to let things slide and see the humor and the joy in life. So even if something bad is happening, it's like, oh my God, of course, they're like, you know, we got robbed again. So that's something that my mom passed down to me. And then the second thing is, like, I don't feel like there's like a recipe for, you know, blending humor and trauma. I feel like I write like I cook, which is not that much. Eric's looking at me crazy. But I basically start with trauma. I just like trauma dump on the page, because if I started writing with the goal of, oh, the second you sit down, you have to make all your trauma hilarious, I would never sit down. I'd be like, no, somebody else do that. So I just start with trauma dumping. And then as if I were cooking, I'll be like, okay, there's a lot of trauma over here. Let me like sprinkle in a little bit of humor. And I think of humor as a subliminal way of letting the reader know that no matter how traumatic the experience they're reading is, I still made it far enough in my life that I can look back and laugh. And so it's a way of me inserting hope even during the darkest scenes. And that's something great about Memoir, that you have that promise of, like, no matter what you're reading, the writer survived, you know?
That's good.
That is, no, that is, you both are just like dropping all the nuggets, and I'm collecting them for Pride because I need to hear all this. And similarly, I feel like there's this part where like Rio and Benny have this conversation about grieving, and like how Rio gets really sad because Benny doesn't grieve, right? And it's just like, and it just kind of goes like this whole like part of like, what is trauma? Like, how do you you know, experience it, and how do you explore it? I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So, okay, something I found out when I was researching this book, Puerto Rico has the highest per capita of asthmatics in the world. And the prevailing theory behind that is that here is an island that has undergone so much occupation, so many genocides, that the grief is coded into our DNA. And I'm an asthmatic. Nearly everybody in my family is an asthmatic. But I forget who helped me make the connection between like the emotion of like, I think it's Eastern medicine says that this is where we hold our grief. And Benny, being in part the poster child for colonialism, who is for his own, you know, survival and just to get through the day, he's not engaging with any of the stuff that he has seen. He's not engaging with all of the loss that he has suffered. And it's all been collecting in his lungs. And it's an immediate thing for Rio, who happens to be a master of his breath. He can breathe air and water, and he doesn't even need to like his breaths happen minutes apart if he wants them to. He immediately like picks up on the disconnect, and he's like, I think your problem is that you haven't grieved over any of this yet. You've lost your family. Your tia, passed away. You're here by yourself with, people that you're struggling to get along with, and you mean to tell me you don't know how to cry? And it's funny because like that's a part of Benny that comes right out of my own life, and how many times through like even just hearing stories that my mom experienced when she first came to New York. She was born in Puerto Rico. She came to Brooklyn, and because she did not speak English, her kindergarten teacher shoved her in a closet and would leave her there all day. And from that moment on, she erased her accent. And she didn't just speak English, she spoke it the best out of everybody in the class. Like that kind of like, once again, put on the performance of, this perfect ideal is what has been passed on every generation of my family. And it's something that like my sister and I still, have to unpack. And so Benny's story was part of my own unpacking all of that.
Well, thank you for exploring that with Benny and stuff. And it relates a lot, hits home, so I'm sure to other people too. Now we want to pivot a bit to Chismeando con Venessa y Edgar, where we get to learn a little bit more about both of you as individuals, more so. So our first question, Venessa, when did you first realize that language and words have power? If you could tell us that story.
I think I first realized that language had power when I was having just family gatherings with my Puerto Rican side was there, my Sicilian side was there, and then we had a bunch of like my parents' coworkers, and it was just a hodgepodge of different languages. And what's fascinating about that is like the Puerto Rican contingent of my family had no idea how to speak Sicilian, and they didn't know how to speak Spanish, but nobody asked for translations. Like all you needed was like the intention of the person in the room with you, and you could. Your heart could do the translating, so to speak. And so just being immersed in all of these different languages, you just get like you grow an appreciation for the ways it becomes like the music of your culture. And yeah, I tried to maybe weave that a little bit into this idea of like a native song in the book and whatnot.
Thank you. Edgar?
And I love all the Puerto Rican Spanish in your book, by the way. It was one of my favorite things. I think I first learned the power of language when I was a kid. And, my mom doesn't speak perfect Spanish, or perfect English, I should say. And when I was a kid, she spoke even worse English. And so I would just see her struggling to do basic things like, at the doctor's office, she had trouble communicating with the doctor, or when she had to go to welfare offices, or had to fill out like legal forms. Like I always saw her struggle with that, and very common, first gen children of immigrants thing being the translator. And even as a kid, realizing how important it was to be able to speak the language of the country and communicate, or else you won't get the things that you need. And then I would say later on in high school, being the translator is amazing because you can also mistranslate. And so, I wasn't a bad kid, but I would get suspended and expelled and this and that, mostly for reasons that I was not at fault. But it was always great, when you would get a letter from your teacher, like, oh, you have to have your mom sign this ISS form in school suspension, and being able to go home and being like, Mama, I'm getting an award, and and you just have to sign this and congratulate me. And I realized there was also power in that, in mistranslating and in controlling your narrative, even if, it's not the most ethical thing. Yeah.
Even though it's not the full truth.
Not the
right?
full truth.
The full truth. Ethical, the full truth. I love that. I feel like there is that power shift. One thing I really enjoyed about your book, Vanessa, is all these dichos that Titi Luz references. And there's this dicho that we always refer to. We like to ask our guests in order to understand who your community is. But there's a Spanish dicho that goes, "Dime con," oh my God, what is it? Dime con quién andas y diré quién eres. So help us understand who you are by telling us who your community is.
Okay, I've been in the theater, community theater community for it feels like my whole life. We were all theater kids. Musicians are my tribe for sure. And more recently, the Latina writer community. A lot of When the Tides Held the Moon was cheerleaded by the group at the Highlights Foundation campus. And yeah, Alex Villasante and Nonica Ramos, and that was really heartening because just being queer and Puerto Rican, there are very few of us that feel, I guess, at home in the family. And they were, my familia.
Edgar?
Yeah, I'm with the broke people. I'm with the poor girls. I'm with the girls that show up 10 minutes before they start charging cover at the club. I'm with the girls picking up whatever drink somebody left by. I'm with the girls hosting clothing swaps. With the people who, when I'm like, hey, I'm gonna be in your town, are like, oh, come stay with me. Shout out to Sal. Yeah, I'm with the broke girls, with the people who are looking out for each other and who are in community with each other and who are trying to find a way to survive where a way was never shown to us. Yeah.
I feel seen by the theater hustler, too. That's the hybrid that I feel.
Same. So we're in DC we're at the heart of Pride season, and I want to ask you about your relationship to Pride. How are you celebrating Pride, or how are you resisting during these challenging times? We're obviously living in some really dark times, but what's your relationship to Pride?
So I feel like the last few years, Pride has been more meaningful to me than ever because I'm sharing it with my sons. And, we read queer books all year round and whatnot, but, when they get to come with me to events or we go to Drag Queen Story Hour and stuff like that, what I really love is just seeing how much of a non-issue it is for them to just be immersed in it and having a good time and painting rainbows and stuff. Obviously, part of it is also just the conversations that we have about it. We're in a very weird moment right now where, for reasons we are vilifying trans people in government, and that's not acceptable. And my kids are spun up on this injustice and how they can be allies to their queer and non-binary and trans classmates because those kids are right in the classroom with them. So yeah.
Yeah, Pride, I think, is a complicated thing, I'm at a place where I do love myself. I love what I get to do. And I feel like I have, gone through this odyssey and found myself and fallen in love with myself. And that's amazing. But on the flip side, I think just because I am proud doesn't mean that I'm not, nervous or feel like I don't have to strategize when I go out in the street. Maybe I'm presenting really femme that day. I'm I want to make sure that I'm around a group of people who can defend me or who can fight with me. And so for me, pride and survival go hand in hand. How am I celebrating Pride? I'm going to this amazing concert tonight. No, I'm just kidding. I can't.
We both had tickets to Shakira tonight, and yeah, you did too. Who had tickets to Shakira? Raise your. I'm sorry.
And
We have to do karaoke after this to make up for it.
go to a gay bar and see a drag queen Shakira tribute. There's one at Bunker tonight.
There you go.
Yeah. But how am I actually celebrating Pride now that I can't go to Shakira? Though I am still in my Shakira outfit. Because I was going to run out of here and go.
Gonna sign books on her way out. She's like,
I'm celebrating. When I think of celebrating, I'm thinking of specifically my roots in Florida, where they are actively silencing and banning queer books. I think of my librarian friend there who told me the other day that he had to cancel all his queer programming out of fear of repercussion and losing like the budget. The way that I'm celebrating and that I'm resisting is by being really petty. And in my mind, you know, if they're canceling the queer programming, I'm gonna be the queer programming.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have to be on a stage. I will be walking down the street in my Shakira outfit, and that's gonna be the queer programming. You know, me being my, you know, authentic self out in the street, that is a way to resist erasure. And when I think about myself as a kid and the things that helped me the most, it wasn't like anything that I saw on TV. It wasn't really politics, because I wasn't paying attention to that. It was the queer people, the everyday queer people that I would see, you know, at the mall or at restaurants or anywhere, just living their happy, ordinary lives. And so now that I'm older and I have the opportunity to be that for some kid, I'm gonna take it, yeah.
we accept it and we love it and we're going to celebrate it too. So we are heading up close to time, so we have one final question that is not meant to be morbid, but if you want to take it that way, we will accept it. Sergio and I are on this path to figure out, you know, our relationship with the inevitable and what happens in the afterlife. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with this holiday, Dia de los Muertos, but it's a time when we like to celebrate our, the loved ones who have passed. So in an attempt to change our relationship with death, we like to ask our guests the following question. Let's say that you're tasked with writing your final literary piece of work, and it happens to be your own obituary. If you could just share a line that shows up in that obituary.
I wrote mine down because I have perimenopause and there's no remembering anything if I don't write it down. So, Vanessa's grandmother would be relieved to know that they did not kick the bucket before teaching their kids how to make bistec and cebollado from memory.
That is my mother's favorite dish at any Mexican restaurant. Bistec and cebollado is her favorite. It's fantastic.
Girl, I have no idea. What? Write my obituary. What the hell? It's fine. I would say, maybe it would be aspirational, okay?
Oh, there you go.
Edgar traveled the world, was the star of many a dark room, and danced whenever he could, yeah.
There you go.
He met Shakira.
And met Shakira.
Yeah, met Shakira.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Edgar and Vanessa. Really appreciate it. This was a great discussion.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having us.
Be sure to follow Edgar on Instagram and Otro Edgar Gomez and Venessa at V Kelley Art.
And also be sure to like, follow, comment, subscribe to Los Bookies podcast.